All right. Hey, everyone. It is November 4, and we are really winding down this list of V1 Alpha 1 blockers. It really feels like a release is in sight. I guess we'll just start by going through the few alpha blockers we have left. I think we are really on pace again for that milestone timeline here. But let's just run through these really quickly. Harry had a great PR to add a simple getting started guide. I've added a few little nitpicks on this one. I've gone back and forth a little bit, but I think we're nearly at the end of this, and I think it's just about good to go. But if anyone else wants to take a look at this, definitely encourage it. I think it's a great way to get started. It's really simple. It builds on how you install, how you would actually use a sample example, and of course, how you clean up afterwards. Really simple structure. It makes sense to me. And so, yeah, just a couple small things there, but I think we're awfully close on that one. And this one actually solves a couple issues. One of our blocking issues that we'll get to shortly asks for two things. One, it wants a gateway class HTTP route combination. This does this. And it also wants an example of targeting routes in multiple namespaces, which this also does, if I'm remembering correctly. Yes, selects routes from all namespaces. So given that, I think this is actually a really good PR. And once we get this in, which feels really close, we should be able to consider this issue potentially done enough. There's lots more room to expand on this, but we will have these two bullet points, which are the ones we considered blocking, taken care of. Lots of room to improve there. With that said, the next one is also from Harry, and it's all about app protocol. Again, this feels awfully close to me. I had, again, just a couple tiny nits that I added today as far as review. I don't think there's too much. Let me actually look at the diff real quick. I don't think there's too much of interest or that would surprise anyone here. We've already talked about where app protocol belongs, and we landed on it as an annotation on backend policy, and that's what this ends up doing here. The name of the annotation makes sense to me. I think this is all really straightforward. So at this point, the only thing I had left as a suggestion was just a little bit of cleanup. But if anyone is really interested in that protocol, definitely take a look. And so with that, we are awfully close to being done with our blocking requests. And that leaves the all-important TCP route and UDP route match all requests. And I talked a little bit with Danian this morning, afternoon, I don't know, time's a blur, about this one. And it sounds like you're still able to take this one on.
Yeah, and I've started looking at it. If you want to scroll down to my latest comment, I'm kind of where my head's at with this. And the first part of it is that I do like the approach of just stating that, if there are no specified matching criteria, that all requests should match. Yeah, I think that provides consistency with some of the other API fields. And then also, I just kind of looked at ingress and like the ingress host name is, all those fields are kind of similar in behavior, right? That if it's not defined, then it's just a catch-all.
Yeah.
Or match-all.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously the easiest because it's not actually, a new API field, but it's also probably the easiest to understand. I had at least initially thought of this kind of enum based approach But I think that would just get confusing, especially since you can have multiple matches. So you have, yeah. I completely agree with the direction you're going. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the enum approach is something that we could eventually migrate to, I think, pretty easily if need be. If you could scroll back down to my comment though, because in just the initial pass, I did kind of question why this issue doesn't call out TLS route though. I'm not sure if you can just kind of go to the TLS route match.
Yeah.
And we could take a look at that really quick because I feel like maybe we need to define something there because there's no real definition. All right, the TLS route match criteria, says based on the SNIs that are specified, right? Which could, very similar to host name, right? It could be precise, or we could have a wild card. But if we think here is, well, what if it's not specified? And if you look at line 99, right? I mean, we admit that there's no defaulting going on, and so I don't know if that's maybe a bug. Where we should have a default, or we should remove the omit empty, and this field should be required. But I think definitely we need to also address, is this required? And if not, then what do we do when there's no SNIs that are specified?
Yeah, this is a confusing combination here because we have a min items 1 here and omit empty, which doesn't make sense. So yeah, we can probably remove omit empty, but then up here matches has no min, so matches are technically optional, it seems. And we do not, the closest thing we say here is if any one of the matches is satisfied, which seems to infer that if there are no matches, then it isn't a match. Like if there are no matches specified, which would be inconsistent. Does
it seems like also you can't have a default?
What's that?
Is it possible to match all SNI host names? It doesn't seem possible right now.
Yeah, we currently have explicitly disallowed this on line 86.
But even that in of itself, like even if you could put star, it doesn't match everything.
Yeah, okay, so you're referring to it's just not even possible to do to match all.
I think it's like given the way it's defined right now, you can't match everything because it only matches a single label.
I'm not sure what you mean. So, I mean, there's definitely support for, star.example.com here, right? So it can match. Well, I guess that it is still matching a single label. Okay.
We could update line 86, right, to say you cannot have a wildcard label by itself, which a user may think, oh, match all, right, and add a sentence there to say to match all. Just don't specify a match or an or leave SNIs unspecified, and that would match all. So we'd say, right, the wildcard would need to have something with it, like line 83, right, to specify that it's a subdomain, wildcards for a subdomain, and to match all SNI traffic, just like the other fields that we're talking about, host name or an HTTP route match, by not defining a match, the default is to match all, in this case, all SNI host names.
Okay.
Yeah, like, I mean, yeah, either one. So, but I think we are missing a default right now.
Let me play around with the TLS stuff. Sorry, Bowie, can you repeat that?
I'm thinking, like, is it possible to find a fall through? Is my primary concern, I think.
Why don't I play around with this from the TLS route standpoint? Unless, I mean, we can still discuss it, but maybe I could just submit a PR. I just wanted to call out that, you know, I looked at the different APIs, and it looks like the issue, what is it, 415 doesn't specify TLS route. It just says UDP route and TCP route, and I feel like we also need to address TLS route.
Yeah, I think so. I wanted to pull up HTTP routes because we have very, very similar Go docs here, just for host names instead of SNI. And we have the same, you know, you cannot have a wildcard label by itself. The difference here is we have added, if I can find where it is in here, if no host name is specified, traffic is routed based on route rules. I thought we had something like more.
Well, if you go to HTTP route rules, because that's essentially TCP route rules, UDP route rules, TLS route rules is where this issue resides in the other APIs. And if you go to HTTP route rules, it has a default saying, you know, prefix precise and a slash, which means match all.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's the same behavior, but how we implement it is a little differently.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. And here we've got it. I get it. Yeah. Inside match itself. Okay.
But can you go back to the, what was it, the host name that you were just looking at? Because I saw that that's optional and we don't.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's omitted, we can omit host names. Yep. What happens if host names are omitted?
This is not as, I thought we had something more clear than we do here. But my recollection was the intent is if no host name is specified.
Got it.
All traffic, you know, goes through the route rules. And then obviously the other thing that isn't explicitly said here is matches are based on the most specific, the longest matching combination of host and path. So if host isn't specified, it's really a catch-all.
There should be a PR to address some of those. Rob, I took your comments.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Not that's relevant at this moment, but this should look a little different pretty soon.
Yeah. That's okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, let me pull that up because we've got, I think, plenty of time here. And thank you for filing this PR.
I didn't even see the comments. Yeah, I'll take that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, so I think this will also be a good way to clarify, though this may not, I think we still need something to be a little bit more clear when host name is not specified here. I think we may be clear on gateway listener. That may be what I'm thinking of. But in HTTP route, it looks like we're not clear enough for what happens when host name.
Something that I was thinking while you guys were talking about those other host name specifics, like in say a standard HTTP no TLS, is it that we're just going to ignore like that host field of the HTTP header? Like, is that the appropriate behavior and like only depend on the routes. I guess is that the intent behind saying if host name is not provided?
Yeah.
That is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Though obviously, if another route provided a host name and that matched, it would be given precedence, which this PR covers. It covers fairly well.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was clear because I guess we did talk about the headers too, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Cool. Danian, did you have any other questions or any other points of discussion on TLS route and how that, or do you think you have enough to start?
I have enough to start. I was just going to say, if you want to quickly update 415 to just call out that it's, foo route or include TLS route in there, just to make sure when I push the PR and link it to the issue that it's clear.
Good call. Yeah.
I should have a PR pushed either later today or tomorrow.
Perfect. That's awesome. Yeah, let's head back to this other PR because I think there's a couple interesting things. Most of this we've already kind of established for longest matching combination, but one of the things that was absent before was how header matching played in here. So let's say you have as an example, two routes that specify it's two route rules that specify the same host name and path, but different header matches. That feels like another thing where we need a tiebreaker. And the proposal here, I think, makes sense, even though this is a real edge case. And I don't know how possible this is to actually implement. But the idea is the number of header matches, the largest number of header matches is given precedence here. This obviously feels like quite an edge case, but it seemed like we needed something for this. Does this even feel possible or reasonable?
I guess I thought it was possible. Obviously, I'm biased given the author. Yeah. The one thing that did stand out to me, hopefully this doesn't distract us too much from that question, is that the host name, in terms of having a host colon HTTP header, that also is a header. Not that we have to get bogged down in that, but it does seem kind of strange that we have that delineation.
That's fair.
It's not possible to have a header host. I guess that wasn't the intent of the header match to include that host. That's why
it wasn't the intent, but there's nothing to prevent it. So that is definitely a point of confusion. I think because host name is so common, it was seen as a kind of a short form, a shortcut, an easy to understand way to match, but definitely potential for duplication. That's a good point.
Well, I guess to go back to your initial question, I thought about this for a while. It didn't seem like there was any reason that you couldn't have a len linked call or something to that effect once you're already parsing that header, right? So it seemed implementable, I suppose.
No, I think I agree with that too. Like I think I'd been part of this discussion or suggestion or something like, and it seemed reasonable to me as well. I just wanted to make sure that there were no red flags here for anyone else that but it sounds like not. So I'll call that a win.
Well, I'm a little concerned about the first bullet point, the longest matching combination of host name and path. I assume that is because you have wildcards, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like that could produce some really unintuitive behavior if you had, say, star.foo.com/foobar and then foobar.foo.com/foo. And you have to figure out, you have to really think about which one of those is more exact, because you're taking the catenation, I assume, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to come up with a concrete example, but it seems like you really have to think about that. I feel like it would make more sense to match on something like the most specific host, and then if you have multiple matches, then you go to the most specific path, or the longest matching path. But does that make sense, though? I mean, can you see it? It seems like it might be confusing.
Yeah, no, it does. It does make sense. Yeah,
maybe that's why hostname is pulled out instead of being like a header, because it's like that junction point that you arrive at first.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable approach here. To your first tiebreaker is length of hostname match, and then if you have a match there, you go on to length of path that matches. Then you go on to length of headers that match, and so on down the list. That's a good point.
Mike, I was going to mention in the ingress KEP, which was linked in the issue for this PR, there was like a nice little table of kind of exactly what you were saying, like if this scenario, how does that result? And that's where these comments were pulled from.
That's a good point. We could probably have something like very similar in our own docs.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe not in the Go docs, but the make docs or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, you're saying there's a table in the KEP link from the issue. Is that okay?
No, in the ingress docs on the website, there's I think we may have a couple tables, but one of them we have for different path matches. We have a path, like a path that's specified in the ingress spec, a request path, and whether or not it matches, kind of thing, all the way down. That's my approximate approximate memory of how we structured that. But something that makes it clear, like some examples of, okay, you have this input, what is going to be chosen? Yeah. Cool. Anything else we can cover on this PR? Did you have any other things you thought might be worth discussing here, Rich?
No, just catching up on your comments. Thanks for that feedback. I'll get this squared away. Cool. I appreciate the help getting oriented here.
Cool. This is great. Thank you. Let me take one look back at our blockers. I think we've covered all of them at this point. At this point, we have a PR that should resolve most of the key issues here, at least the ones we considered blockers. We should have a PR this week for this one, the match all requests. And the other one is app protocol. So I think we're awfully close as far as things we've identified as blockers. So with that said, let me pull up the V1 Alpha 1 milestone. There hasn't been a lot of movement here. I just wanted to raise attention to one issue I created today. And this, I have not prioritized this. It probably shouldn't. Well, it's something that we need to figure out in very close relation to the V1 Alpha 1 launch. And that's how we structure our repository after we've released an API that is final, you know? Obviously, I think that involves creating a new directory for V1 Alpha 2 and directing the majority of work towards V1 Alpha 2. What's less clear is how we handle documentation, how we structure other parts. Do we need release branches kinds of things? This is not something we need to answer on this call, obviously, but I just wanted to get that that discussion started and get people thinking about this, because we really are at this point, I think, 2 weeks away from when we said we would have a V1 Alpha 1 release cut. So yeah, if anyone has examples of repos or projects that have done this well, that would be great to add here. I don't think this is an absolute requirement to have everything figured out before V1 Alpha 1 launches. It basically prohibits us from making any progress beyond V1 Alpha 1 until we've solved these things. So we obviously would need to do it relatively quickly. And yeah, like Bowie says, posting some examples, looking at projects that have done this before us seems like a good starting point. Does anyone, offhand have any ideas of projects that would be a good reference point? Obviously, I keep on thinking of Cluster API, but I don't know if there are others that we should be referencing as well. Okay.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, but I'll be on the lookout.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, and if anyone else comes up with anything, yeah, just add them here. And yeah, thanks. All right, so that's for the milestone. And the one thing that I wanted to cover today, it seems like we'll have time, is to run through this. This I've been watching our suggested names for Gateway, and you can see that the last suggestion came in 6 days ago. So I think, and I mentioned it at the last SIG network meeting last week. I think might have gotten 1 or 2 since then, and that's been about it. I think we have a reasonable starting point here. But I think one thing that they did well in multi-cluster, which I'm basing this process off of loosely, is ran through with maintainers of the project and tried to identify names that maintainers just really didn't like. Basically gave the opportunity to veto any potential names here. Unfortunately, I think some of these probably need to be trimmed before we open voting on this. But I think most of them are probably acceptable. And we can also revisit this later. I may post in Slack as well. But I think the most obvious one, I think, is, at least to me, is Ingress, which I would love to do Ingress v2, but obviously this is both a bit broader than that, and also something that cannot easily round trip between Ingress and API resources that essentially split that resource out and add more. I think it, as much as it would be nice to keep that consistent naming, I think it would be difficult to do that. And so my preference would be to veto that. And I can add some reasoning in a comment on this one.
Wouldn't it also just be like a usability nightmare because you'd have to type out the full name?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be. I've spent a while thinking about exactly how this could work, and I think it would be overly confusing, unfortunately. And it also, I think, would be confusing to users to think that, okay, I have ingress in V1 and ingress in V2 is approximately a quarter of what ingress in V1 was. And so where did everything else go? I think at that point, it makes sense to just have a different name. Yeah.
I would say it's confusing because in my mind, the V1 ingress corresponds more to the service API's HTTP route. Yeah. But there isn't really a good correspondence. So yeah, it's like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I will strike that one through. Does anyone have any strong feelings about gateway proxy? What about black hole? or Bowie is suggesting new ones.
No.
Yeah.
I think like the problem, well, when we shopped around gateway, the issue was that people were like, oh, it's a gateway, it's a specific thing.
Yeah.
And if you use the word proxy that has a similar issue, black hole is interesting, but I don't know if that is like a serious suggestion.
Yeah, I would lean towards vetoing it, but I also don't know how many people will actually vote for it anyways. But I would rather not. Yeah. And Bowie, just to clarify, were you suggesting that with gateway proxy, you would prefer to have proxy not in the name of the resource?
Yeah, just even gateway in of itself is already like a physical thing in some people's minds, and proxy is even more of that. So we have, for example, for gRPC, some people are looking at also using this, but having like a gateway for gRPC, but gRPC is proxyless. And then there was a bit of hang up, like, oh no, like it doesn't match.
Yeah. Okay, what about Vortex? I don't know. I'd certainly not my favorite.
Yeah, like I don't know, when you first hear pod, you're like, what is this? And then eventually it's okay. So take that into account. Like we shouldn't eliminate the meaningless words because that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. On-ramp. I think on-ramp and a lot of these actually all kind of refer very clearly to ingress, which I think is, potentially an issue if we're also, longer term thinking of potential egress use cases for the same API. I don't know how serious any of those egress use cases are, but on-ramp does seem to limit us to single direction that this would model. I don't know. Any thoughts on this one? I hate to get rid of too many of these because you know, I do want a reasonable amount, but I think the ones closer to the top are better in my limited opinion. So anyone, these are my personal preference. Please feel free to say, no, this is actually something like that we should keep on the list. All right. Entry, I think.
I do like service, but we can't use that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, entry, I think for the same reason. I would personally say everything that is suggesting a one-way direction is something like I would prefer to avoid here. But maybe, you know, I don't know. I don't want to rule out too many if egress is not going to be much of a use case here. I know that's more of a conceptual thing at this point, but yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm just going to get rid of these and speak up if you like them. I actually like the name inlet and inflow. I am just concerned about their potentially being too narrow of terms. Exposure, that's technically valid. I like portal, I think, though also has a lot of different meanings. But
that's the original name for service, by the way.
Oh, cool. I remember Tim saying that he was going to add.
Yeah, we can definitely bring it back.
Yeah. So, well, I guess I don't have to. Well, technically, this is the same idea as inflow and and inlet, in that it is a single direction. So for that same reason, I will strike this one out. Service router, edge, router, app gateway, and gateway. Obviously, gateway has to be one of the options. Bowie, was it you that added this traffic something? Or I'm not sure who added
it. Yeah, I added that. I'm thinking I kind of like portal and I kind of like service router. And the other one would be the traffic something. Router is interesting. Shorthand, yeah. So those seem interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can do with traffic as a prefix is you can just add things like traffic portal, traffic router, just add traffic edge, you know, add our shorter names and make them more descriptive. Yeah. Okay. Well, I will do that because why not? Can you think of any other suffixes there, Bowie?
Yeah, I think like edge is probably bad because there's too many combinations there. So we end up with like router or service router. These are just my opinions. But basically where we found pushback when we talked about this to other people is the fact that it maps to something that they have a very strong sense of, like gateway, and then they give them a visceral reaction. Which is pretty frustrating. The word doesn't have much actual meaning.
Gangway, that's a good one. Is that the name of a product anywhere? I don't know. I've lost track of all the nautical names for products in the cloud native space. I guess not. Oh no,
it's a Heptio thing.
Heptio. There's always something. Cool. That's unfortunate, but let me actually pull this back up and link it.
Is line 14 necessary since we're talking about alternative names?
No, you're right. I guess it was just as, yeah. No.
Well, how would people say that they want to keep it?
So we need to vote. And I think the reason I had it here was whenever I transfer this into something that can be voted on, I wanted this to be like, I wanted gateway. I guess I should do it alphabetical to be fair.
If we're going to keep gateway, then to update 13 to rid of alternative. And next to gateway in parentheses, just put existing or something like that, so people know that this is currently what we're using.
Sure, makes sense. Okay. But wait, it sounds like you don't like, I think you'd said edge.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a pretty loaded term, even an industry term.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of exposure.
Yeah, it's like a weird noun, although the short one will be kind of cool, like XP.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, it feels like not the best name or connotation. So in that case, we end up with, we pull this. I think we need to get rid of this if it overlaps with anything, though I don't know. Is this a strong enough overlap? Yeah, it looks like it's still actively maintained. Though admittedly, we're never going to have a completely unique name. So if anyone wants to push for it, I'm fine with keeping it as well. Okay. So that leaves us with a reasonable list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 options. That seems like a reasonable starting point to vote on. Does anyone want to circulate this list further and get any other potential names? Are you comfortable with this list and ready to send this out for a vote in the next few days? I will take silence as great, but go ahead, Damien, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I think it's ready to get out to a wider audience.
Cool. Great. Well, yeah, I think there's some interesting names here. I'm kind of feeling like Gateway may still win out here, but I don't know. And we don't know until we try. So yeah, we'll see.
One other point on Gateway, does it make sense to make a note there that probably the chief concern is the conflict of the name with Istio?
Yeah, so I think in the survey, I'll have to include all this background. And this is a doc that anyone can edit. So if you want to go in here and edit or suggest changes to reasons to change the name or to keep the name the same, I want to include this kind of background as a starting point for the survey.
Yeah, no, my bad. I didn't notice that.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
That looks good.
All right. Well, great. I think we're nearing the end here then. We already covered that. I think we've covered most of these that have been updated relatively recently. This is a huge one, and I know we've covered it relatively recently, so I don't want to open this can of worms too far again. But just this is going back to the short name and trying not to conflict with Istio and all that fun stuff, and very related to the conversation we just had about potential alternatives. So, you could use short names to get around this problem by always using, instead of kubectl get gateway in our examples, kubectl get GTW or something like that. That would be unique and work. But that's potentially less than ideal. So yeah, this PR has mostly laid silent for around a week now, and it's not at all blocking V1 Alpha 1, so I don't think it needs to be a high priority item. So my preference is probably just to wait and see what happens as far as naming here. And if we find an alternate name, great. And if we don't, then we'll come back and revisit this. But just good to have in the back of your mind as we're thinking about alternate names. Yeah. And with that, I think everything else has been covered already or hasn't changed since we've covered it. Anyone want to bring anything else up? Otherwise, I think we may be able to end this a bit early. Great. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Talk to you later.